Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's midday weather outlook for the southern region brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, this is what I was waiting on this morning. It was the 8 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center about the eventual track of Hurricane Isaias. We can see something quite rare happened overnight, and that was that the system strengthened as it went over the island of Hispaniola. And that normally doesn't happen given how high the mountains are in the center part of that island. But now moving over the Bahamas and up toward parts of Florida, Georgia, and North and South Carolina, we have pretty warm water over which this system is going to move, and because of some slight shifts in the wind shear profile and the way the moisture is out ahead of the system, now the National Hurricane Center is forecasting this to become a hurricane. Or actually, it is a hurricane, but to maintain hurricane status, possibly strengthen with winds upwards of 100 to 120 miles an hour. So it could be a pretty strong system as it moves forward. Looking at the timing here, which is what you've been staring at, it looks as though a late Saturday, early Sunday morning could be getting very close to Florida, and then early next week, sometime late in the day on Monday into early Tuesday is when we're going to be watching for it to impact the Carolinas here. So watching what we saw overnight, this is just a satellite animation of this system through early this morning. So we're seeing the sunrise over Isaias, and there's some pretty active convection, which means the system is quite healthy. And I can see in the upper levels the clockwise spin, the exhausting of the air in the upper levels, which is a good indicator that this system is maintaining itself quite well and is able to complete its vertical circulation. So I think this is a much bigger system to be dealing with here in the near term in terms of its potential impact. So let's dig right into this and figure out where it's going to go. The trick with the forecast is going to be the position of this high. We've seen the models over the last couple of days here in the mid-levels shift the position of that high east and west. Should it go farther to the east, Isaias will likely flow with it and therefore maybe even avert a landfall, but that would require this high pressure cell, of course, moving to the east. And this is just a snapshot, by the way, of what's going to be happening tomorrow morning. The other piece of this is the trough that's sweeping through parts of the mid-south, getting into the southeast, bringing in some cooler weather, some unsettled weather here, but it'll be the eventual steering current that takes this back on its northeast trajectory. Should the high pressure cell stay put or even move a little bit further to the west, what we'd be talking about is a system that skirts very close to Florida and then likely comes into near the North and South Carolina border, potentially with its landfall, although I cannot rule out a landfall in Florida just yet. So taking a look at what the operational models gave us last night with their ensemble guidance, we see over here, this is the GFS, and over here is the European. And kind of a pretty interesting turn of events here. I think the GFS has actually had the better track of this for quite some time, and the European has slowly trended more toward the GFS solution. We generally think that the European model has a better overall guidance, especially longer term on systems, but it looks as though the GFS won out on this one. What we do notice, though, is that getting very close to the Florida coastline, and then eventually both models here have it coming onshore somewhere right now if we would look out to next week, on the North and South Carolina border. Now, the concern I have over this system right now is kind of twofold. First is going to be the wind. This is the European model's maximum gusts over the next 5 days. So we're kind of accumulating the wind and trying to take a look at how strong it is anticipated to be here. And what we see in general is that along the coast of Florida, gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour are possible should the system stay offshore. If it gets any closer, then we're talking about wind gusts that'll be anywhere from 60 to maybe up to 100 miles an hour. As the system then nears this section of North and South Carolina, we see that the models are projecting 40 to 70 mile an hour wind gusts in through here. And I have a concern about especially this region right in through here. It's not the only region to be concerned about, but we do know that that particular spot had been wet very early in the growing season when the crop was going in, and then it got very, very dry, and it's been hot as of late, and therefore the quality or the stand of the crop that's in this area is not what it would have been should it have been stressed early and then gotten better rains later. I was talking to a couple of folks out here earlier this week about it. So seeing these stronger winds plus the rains coming in has me quite concerned. You can also see the stronger winds that would be developing on this low that's cutting through parts of northern Alabama, eventually going to Tennessee, Kentucky, maybe some gusts there at times getting up and above 30 miles an hour. So we'll watch that as well. The GFS model, you again see the path much farther out off of the coast of Florida, but still bringing this system into the North and South Carolina coastline here. And what we notice again is wind speeds 40 to 70 miles an hour is what the models are tending to say. You can also see the stronger winds too, as the GFS has a very similar feature here coming through parts of the Mid-South. Total precipitation. What we've got next is The GFS again. So possibility here to get upwards of 6 inches of rain seems to be in the name of the game here as we get into early next week. And with a deeper trough cutting through the back side of it, it's going to be wet. And I'll show you this in more detail in a few moments, from parts of Missouri and Arkansas through Tennessee, Kentucky, and then to the south of there, some stronger scattered thunderstorms moving across parts of the south in the southeast, including the Delta. The European model gives us this solution, so it's actually very similar. You can see the track of that low cutting through here, and then we also notice that the model is still putting down, very similar to what the GFS was saying, somewhere between 3 and 6+ inches of rainfall in this area. The places where the models are in disagreement in terms of Isaias is going to be down in Florida, and it'll all determine on the proximity of the hurricane to Florida, and if it does continue to keep the majority of its moisture on its eastern and northern side. I think that's what we're going to be watching most carefully. Now, outside of these two systems, across much of the rest of the south, including backing up over towards Texas, we just have a situation where we have hit or miss thunderstorms, because the boundary will be hanging out in this area pretty far to the north, and therefore to the south of it, we don't have the organized boundary on which convection will continue to fire. Now, speaking of convection, this is an animation from midday yesterday through early this morning. We were watching the storms here that went racing through the Red River Valley, through central Texas, and eventually over to Arkansas and Louisiana. Some of these storms produced some larger hail in parts of Oklahoma and Texas, and then straight line wind damage out ahead of that squall line that you see passing through there. I saw another interesting thing on the radar, and I'm going to have to look at this after I'm done with the video here. But if you notice right down here, you see that looks like just a giant outflow boundary. I'm going to go in and specifically pause it here and take a look at this, because this particular feature, see it right there? I'm talking about this thing. It's a very neat radar signature, and I want to know what the heck that is. But anyways, let's go from there and talk about what we're anticipating in terms of precipitation through the next 60 hours. So you can see the low developing here in the central part of the U.S. So watch it again as I start this over. It's coming right through parts of Kansas, Missouri, and then as it spirals through the day tomorrow through parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, a pretty wet day, and that seems to pull into the eastern Corn Belt. To the south of it, we just have a lot of scattered storms out ahead of this main frontal boundary, but this isn't one of those systems that just brings in rain for everyone. Now, you do also notice what the high-resolution NAM is doing with Isaias, and while it seems to be following some of the more consistent pictures we just painted with the European and the GFS, please understand that the NAM model is not a model that is well designed to pick up on hurricanes, and the reason why, they come into and through the boundary of the model. See, the NAM the N for NAM stands for North American. So this is coming out of the tropics, which would be a boundary condition problem for the model here. So we'll just keep an eye on it, but other than that, let's just go right over to our other forecast maps. So this is what happens when the National Weather Service takes all that information and blends it together, and they produce this map twice a day. And this is through the next 7 days. So once again, we can see that through parts of the Carolinas, very heavy rainfall anticipated, but also with that low sneaking through here, we're also anticipating rainfall easily in excess of 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And as the frontal boundary slides through the south, we see that around the Delta, there could be some storms in here that are capable of putting down 1/2 inch to 1 inch of rainfall. But outside of that, that's really kind of it for our southern region over the next 7 days. So let's watch the European model put these pieces together, and we'll just get it paused right here and follow the next couple of days. Ready? So this is getting through later on today as we work into the evening hours. Remember, two lows, the one cutting through here, and Isaias coming up out of the Caribbean, or excuse me, out of the Bahamas. We get into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. This is where the low takes shape over parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, and as it does so, this is where I'm anticipating some stronger winds like we saw earlier in the forecast right in through this quadrant and through here. Notice on the back side of this, relatively dry throughout much of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana. And as we pull through on Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and evening, really at this point, we're going to be watching this deeper trough dig in. So some scattered precip here, which is kind of on the northern side of our southern region, and just right here along the Gulf Coast, just with the heat of the day, which we normally see. Now, the European model does actually bring Isaias right along the coast here, near, right in this area near the Kennedy Space Center, and then brings Isaias, watch this, right through parts of South Carolina on Monday night. By Tuesday morning, it's on the border of the Carolinas, and by Tuesday afternoon and evening, it's pushing right there through eastern North Carolina, bringing in some very, very heavy rainfall. Now outside of that, we have this deeper trough that builds in. And that deeper trough, let me just show it to you here. This is an animation just looking out through the next 10 days. Look at the establishment of that trough in the east before we get out to about Saturday, the 9th, 10th, and 11th. And even at that point, you can still see that the models are favoring ridging over the four corners and a broader trough in this area. And because of that, we get a week 2 precipitation pattern. Let's look at the European first, which is over here on the right-hand side, that still considers, this whole area to have some unsettled weather, wetter than average conditions for a while. This pattern, unfortunately, does shut down the monsoon, not shut it down, but slows it down here. And why does the GFS bring much drier conditions for the whole of the south? Well, that's because the GFS has a ridge that then keeps a broader trough flatter, whereas the European brings that ridge over here and then digs it down, as you just saw. And the difference is just in the depth of the trough as we look out there into the week 2 time period. So keep a close eye on this. Let's talk about the longer term too with respect to hurricanes. Isaias is not the only thing we're watching. Things have been very active off the coast of Africa, and we have another system that we're going to be keeping an eye on that's here and one that just rolled off. Right now, these are given lower probabilities of forming, and thankfully the ridge, the big ridge, is sitting out here, which is going to help curl these systems around, but we need to watch it very carefully as we move through the next 10 days or so. Let's talk temperatures, and we'll do long range and finish this one up, okay? Today, still another hot one here across parts of the Carolinas. Still have heat advisories out here as well. And across much of the rest of the south, you can see how far to the south that front has made it. And as we play this forward, really cool weather for this time of year in parts of the Mid-South and parts of the Delta. It's still hanging on to heat out here before Isaias comes in later. But watch as we go from Saturday into Sunday, now into Monday. That's when the cool down really begins to hit finally the East Coast for Tuesday and into Wednesday and Thursday. So that's how our temperature patterns are playing out over the next 6 days. If we go from there, days 6 through 10, we still see that trough hanging around in both the GFS and the European. So it's not as though we're going to be warming up back over to extreme heat here. Where the heat's going to be is where the ridge is tucked away, and that's going to be in parts of the Four Corner states in western Texas. And that seems to be the pattern all the way out to the middle of August. You notice that the models just want to hang on to this, near average to slight cool bias here and keep the heat west around that ridge. So that seems to be what we're looking at as we stretch things out to the middle of August. Got last night the brand new European weeklies, and we see that the 14th to the 21st is on the top and the 21st to the 28th is on the bottom. Models just won't let go of the stormy pattern in through this area, and it all has to do with where that ridge is going to build. So they're trying to keep the west very warm. See that? And got this cooler slice of air coming through the midsection of the country, even out to the middle of August. I call this into question because we have yet to see the pattern get stuck for this long. In other words, the North Pacific's unblocked, which we talked about earlier this week. And so when we start to see things warming back up here toward the end of August, this is actually very consistent with about a 70-year trend we've had across North America, giving us warmer Septembers and Octobers over the last 70 years. So we'll watch it very carefully to see how this plays out, working our way into the end of the month of August. I do want to point out one thing to you, though. We have seen the strengthening of the trade winds giving us those positive Southern Oscillation Index values. Well, you notice that as you go with time, so this is the 31st all the way down to the 14th of August, these blues indicate where those trade winds are strongest, so right in through here, okay? But you see the reds showing up in this area? That's giving me an idea that there's going to be some stronger winds pushing to the west, a westerly wind burst. And that's going to keep this area, which is right in through there, with a lot of sinking motion in the atmosphere. So the air is going to be going down. That means over in this region, we could get rising motion. And as a result of that rising motion, I expect to continue to see an active time period of the hurricane season, not only through the next 15 days, but beyond that as well. So this hurricane season is jumping off and it's going to get going. We're going to watch the tropics carefully. Thanks for sticking around this week and listening to me talk about the weather. Had a longer briefing for you today, but quite a few important things to be watching over the weekend. I'll give you another update on Monday morning, all right? Have a good one. Thank you.